The gates of the sanctum groaned as the wind clawed through the iron lattice, whispering secrets older than prayer. I stepped beyond them, torch trembling in hand, and the scent of damp stone and incense greeted me like a forgotten confession. My footsteps echoed down the marble causeway, once filled with the murmurs of healers and the dying. Now, silence ruled, broken only by the steady drip of rain from the broken roof above. The abbot's instructions had been simple: guard the halls until dawn. But the unease in his eyes had said far more. Somewhere deep within the cloisters, a faint metallic hum began to rise, distant yet deliberate. Then, through the corridors carried by unseen pipes, came a voice, not loud, but distinct, shaped by rhythm and tone. It spoke my name. Not shouted, whispered, as though it had waited centuries to be sure I would return. The first hours of the watch crept slowly, marked by the rhythm of dripping water and the groan of timbers. I traced my patrol along the outer halls, torchlight bending in the drafts that slipped through broken shutters. Every painting of saints seemed to follow me with hollow eyes, and every door groaned like a thing waking from sleep. Somewhere far down the hall, that same faint voice whispered again, less like a call, more like an invitation. I told myself it was the wind through the pipes, yet when I passed the ancient infirmary, the scent of myrrh rose thick in the air, fresh as though the dead still breathed beneath the floor. The infirmary stretched before me like a cathedral of ruin. Iron beds lined the walls, each draped in cobwebs and dust. A broken crucifix hung above an altar table where glass jars of ancient remedies still stood, their contents blackened and thick. My torch caught a glint, something metallic beneath one of the beds. When I knelt to look, the sound came again. A whisper through brass, closer now, clearer, shaping each syllable with intent. I froze, every instinct clawing at my chest. The voice spoke my name again. This time it exhaled, as if breathing beside me. I followed the whisper to a side corridor, narrow and unseen in daylight. The air was colder here, heavy with a sweetness like burnt herbs. My torch sputtered, fighting to live. Ahead, faint light pulsed from a small chapel alcove. As I stepped inside, the flame steadied, as if the air itself held its breath. A chalice rested upon the altar, filled not with wine, but with stagnant, dark water. I leaned closer, and within its surface saw a reflection not my own. Eyes bright as embers, watching, smiling without lips. The bells rang without hands. A single toll, then silence, then two more, slow as a heartbeat. I dropped the torch and drew my blade, its metal gleaming like frozen dawn. The corridor behind me was empty, yet the air moved as if something unseen passed close by. I stooped to reclaim the torch, and found beside it a key, small and ancient, wrapped in crimson thread. When I turned it over, engraved upon its side were the same letters I had heard whispered, my name. The sanctum was no longer keeping me safe. It was remembering me. Dawn still felt an eternity away. The sanctum had begun to breathe. Timbers creaked in rhythm. The walls exhaled cold, mist, and the air itself trembled with unseen chant. I walked through the corridors of records, shelves of decaying parchment rising like tombstones. Each scroll bore seals cracked with age, yet when my torch brushed one, the wax gleamed fresh. The voice returned, low and patient, murmuring verses from forgotten liturgies. It spoke of sin, sacrifice, and guardianship, until its cadence shifted, reciting details of a massacre I had never confessed aloud. Every syllable matched memory, tone, and breath. The pipes above me rattled like bones as the voice whispered again, "You were meant to stay." The corridor bent into the infirmary annex, where a single door stood ajar. The smell of herbs and decay thickened, familiar yet wrong. I pushed it open and found rows of empty beds neatly made. as though awaiting patients who would never return. A lantern burned in the corner, though I had lit none. As I approached, a faint humming rose from beneath the floorboards, a harmony to the announcer's murmur. The air wavered, and for a heartbeat, I saw shadows moving in the beds, rising, turning their heads toward me. Then the torch sputtered, and they were gone, leaving only the echo of that unseen hymn still vibrating in my chest. I came upon the sanctum's library next, a chamber so vast the torchlight barely reached its edges. Tomes lay scattered, their covers carved with angels whose wings had been scratched away. I lifted one, its pages damp, and within the script I saw my own handwriting, records of duties, hours, confessions written by my hand. Though I had never stood here before, the announcer's voice began again, steady and calm, now using my voice. It recited from the very page I held, describing my arrival this very night. My torchlight flickering, my hesitation by the altar. My breath caught as the words continued, foretelling my death before dawn. I fled the library, yet the voice followed. Not from the pipes this time, but from the walls themselves. The bricks pulsed faintly, alive with the echo of that terrible prophecy. I reached the cloister garden at the sanctum's heart, its once holy fountain now filled with black rainwater and the reflection of a waning moon. In the rippling surface, shapes of cloaked figures gathered, their hands clasped in silent devotion. My torch flickered low, but their silhouettes remained, motionless, praying, though no sound emerged. Then, one by one, they lifted their heads, and all their faces were mine. The whispers drew me to the great refectory, where long tables lay rotted and overturned. My torch dimmed until its glow barely licked the stone. Upon the central table, etched deep into the wood, was a map of the sanctum, corridors and chambers I had yet to see. At its center, marked by ink the color of dried blood, were words written in a script both ancient and familiar. The voice waits where you began. The wind surged, scattering dust like ashes across the inscription. I knew then that the sanctum was not haunted by ghosts, it was haunted by memory, and that memory was mine. The chapel doors had sealed behind me, though I had not touched them. The air here was colder, still as a tomb, lit only by the dull shimmer of moonlight spilling through fractured glass. I walked slowly between the pews, their surfaces warped with age and burn marks. The faint hum of the pipes returned, but now it bore a cadence, a woman's voice woven into the murmur. A hymn I half remembered from my years at war, sung for the dying. I followed the sound to the altar, where light gathered in a shape of pale blue. A woman knelt there, her head bowed, hands clasped. Her robes moved, though there was no wind. When she lifted her face, sorrow met serenity, and she spoke the first words I had heard from living lips that night. "Why did you come back, keeper of sins?" I could not speak. Her eyes, luminous, unblinking, held the weight of centuries, and her voice fell over me like incense smoke. "You bear his key," she whispered. "The gate below has long awaited its keeper." I demanded to know who she was, but she only smiled, the corners of her lips trembling as if laughter and grief fought for dominance. Once I healed bodies. Now I mend nothing but memory. As she spoke, her form flickered, her face turning skeletal in flashes of light. The torch hissed and dimmed. Her outline swayed as if underwater. "Do not wake the ones beneath," she murmured. "They remember your name too." The torches along the walls flared to life one by one, as though drawn by her words. The chapel bloomed in flickering light, revealing murals of saints performing healings that twisted into scenes of suffering. In the painted eyes of the angels, I saw movement, each figure turning subtly toward us. The announcer's voice filled the chamber then, not distant but here, vibrating through the stones. "Mariel, Arendor. The covenant remains. The ghost turned sharply toward the ceiling, anguish seizing her features. It should have ended, she cried, and with that the candles shattered, sending sparks into the darkness. When the light returned, she was gone, leaving the brass chalice overturned and the air trembling with heat. Smoke coiled through the chapel as silence reclaimed the air. I lifted the chalice she had overturned. Inside it gleamed a fragment of parchment sealed in wax. The edges burned faintly with blue flame, yet did not consume. On it were lines written in my own hand. Words of confession I did not remember writing. The announcer's voice whispered through the walls once more, calm and tender. You sealed your sins beneath her prayers. I looked toward the altar, but the mist that had formed her presence was already seeping through the cracks in the floor, descending toward the catacombs below. The bells tolled again, this time from beneath the floor, slow, measured, echoing through hollow chambers unseen. I descended toward the stairwell, the sound guiding me like a pulse. The further I went, the colder the air became, until frost gathered on my gauntlets. At the base of the steps, a narrow archway yawned open, marked by symbols I could not read, but somehow remembered. The announcer's voice no longer whispered. It breathed. Each exhale pressed against my skin as if the walls themselves lived and waited. I held the key tight and whispered a prayer that no longer felt like faith, only fear. Then, with a trembling hand, I opened the way. The stairway tightened as it fell, spiraling into stone depths where sound itself seemed trapped. The torch sputtered under the weight of the air, its flame bending backward, as though resisting descent. Each step felt heavier, not from labor, but remembrance. Murmurs seeped from the walls, snatches of confession, weeping, and the metallic ring of chains. When I reached the bottom, the passage opened into a hall, lined with rusted instruments and benches for judgment. Symbols of penance carved deep into the walls pulsed faintly, still warm to the touch. I recognized them. They were the markings of the plague tribunals, where healers were judged for mercy. The announcer's voice drifted softly through the darkness. Do you recall whom you saved, Arendor, and whom you left to die? I moved deeper into the chamber, each echo of my boots blending with faint cries that did not belong to the present. Tables lay overturned, their surfaces etched with prayers of absolution. In one corner stood a chair fashioned of iron and restraint, its arms bound with crimson thread like veins. I reached for it, compelled by dread, and saw that beneath the rust lingered dried blood. The moment my fingers brushed the metal, the chamber quaked, and the walls rippled with imagery. Visions of plague victims bound and branded, of healers forced to name those unhealed. And among them a man knelt, my own armor upon his shoulders, his eyes pleading toward unseen judges. The announcer's voice rose above the echoes, patient and cruel. You sat here once. The visions clawed at my mind. I staggered toward the far wall, where a mural had been half buried in soot. I wiped the grime away and revealed the painted face of a woman, her features unmistakable. Sister Mariel. Beneath her image, a Latin inscription burned faintly in gold leaf. She who heals the guilty redeems herself. My breath trembled. The announcer's voice softened, almost mournful. She pleaded for your life when the fever came. She took your sin into her prayer. I pressed my hand to the painting. The wall pulsed beneath my palm like flesh. For an instant, her eyes moved, and I heard her whisper, "Set us free." Beyond the mural lay an arched door sealed with molten wax. The key I carried burned against my chest, its metal searing through cloth as if recognizing its purpose. I pressed it into the lock, and a hiss of cold air escaped, tasting of incense and ashes. The chamber beyond glowed with an otherworldly radiance. Rows of kneeling monks faced a great brass horn, mounted into the wall, its mouth wide as a man's shoulders, polished, though untouched by light. The figures were not statues but mummified bodies, still bowed in eternal prayer. From the horn came a slow, rhythmic breathing. The announcer's presence made manifest. It was not sound. It was hunger. I stepped among the husks of monks, each frozen mid-prayer. The air vibrated with unseen resonance, low and steady like a heart too large for flesh. The announcer's voice filled the space. No longer distant, but emerging from the horn's abyssal mouth, they gave their breath so I might speak. You, their sentinel, kept my memory intact. The realization struck cold. This voice had been born of the dying, their final prayers distilled into echo. My torch bent toward the horn as though pulled by its will. The metal shimmered, reflecting my face distorted by light, whispering the same words that had haunted me since I entered. You were meant to stay. And as I stared, the reflection blinked back. The horn's surface rippled as if alive, each vibration breathing warmth into the air. The sound that issued from within no longer felt like mere resonance. It carried memory. Images flooded my thoughts. The plague sweeping through the sanctum, the healers overwhelmed, the dying filling every hall. I saw myself among them, younger, desperate, praying for salvation that never came. The abbot had promised redemption for those who would give their breath to the voice, to preserve divine speech for the empire. But what they created was no miracle. It was a hunger, an echo born from the last exhalations of the dying. My torchlight faltered, revealing 100 more faces carved into the horn's base, their mouths open in eternal cry. The announcer's voice softened, almost human now. You prayed for deliverance, it murmured, and I answered. I staggered back, clutching the key at my chest. The horn seemed to follow, its echoes shaping my own breath into words. You chose to survive when others begged to die. That was your sin. The ground trembled, and one of the mummified monks lifted its head, bones cracking, empty sockets turning toward me. The others followed, movements slow, reverent, their lips opening in silent chant. They are not yours to save, the voice continued. They are your prayer made flesh, I cried out, demanding to know what it wanted. The answer came calm and absolute. To be remembered. The ground beneath my feet split open, revealing the catacombs below. Foul wind rose, thick with dust and whispers. From the chasm, Sister Mariel emerged again, no longer serene, but radiant with anguish, her light torn between purity and decay. You cannot silence it, she pleaded. It is bound to you. It was born of your breath when you begged for absolution. Her eyes met mine, shimmering with tears of light. Destroy it, and the sanctum will die with you. The announcer roared through the chamber, the sound bending the air, shaking the mummified choir into fragments. Between the horn's echoes and her sorrow, I realized this was not haunting. It was penance. I raised my torch high and pressed the brass key against the horn's mouth. The voice screamed, a sound that was neither human nor divine. 1,000 breaths expelling at once. The monks' corpses turned to dust, their forms breaking apart like sand caught in a gale. Mariel cried out, her glow flickering violently. If you end it, you end it. You end me, she cried. My hand shook, torn between mercy and release. You were the only mercy I ever knew, I whispered. The key turned of its own accord, sinking deep into the horn's core. Light erupted from within, white and endless, carrying the scent of myrrh and blood. When the light faded, silence filled the chamber for the first time. The horn was cracked, its golden surface dim and lifeless. I fell to my knees among the ashes of monks who had once prayed unceasing. Mariel was gone, her presence lingering only as warmth in the cold air. I lifted the key from the ground, now blackened and brittle. As I turned to leave, a faint whisper touched my ear, softer than breath. You kept your watch. I looked toward the ruined horn. Its mouth was still, yet within the silence I could almost hear a heartbeat, slow, steady, waiting for the night to fall again. The chamber trembled long after the horn's light had died. I thought I had silenced it, yet the air still hummed faintly, carrying a pulse that echoed through my bones. My torch flickered weakly, casting twin shadows behind me. One mine, the other moving a heartbeat slower. I turned and found the cracked horn bleeding molten gold, each drop vanishing into the stone like swallowed tears. The warmth grew unbearable, my vision blurred, and in its haze I saw the faces from the horn's base. Not carved, but alive, breathing through the walls. The announcer's voice spoke again, quiet but unmistakably my own. You tried to end me, it said, but you were always my breath. Pain erupted behind my eyes, a pressure like the swell of tides within my skull. The ground shifted, and the chamber's walls twisted into a spiraling corridor of light and memory. Voices poured from every direction, reciting prayers I once muttered in battle, each one bending back into my own tone. I tried to flee, but my body no longer obeyed. The torch burst apart, scattering embers that hung motionless in the air. My reflection stared from every surface, lips moving without command. You sought absolution, the voice said through me. Now bear what the saints refused. My chest tightened. Breath ceased to feel like life. It felt like surrender. The floor dissolved into mist. I stood within a boundless hall made of shifting memories, battlefields, plague wards, the chapel above, all bleeding into one another. Through the haze strode Abbot Theon, 70 male, his robe aflame yet untouched by heat. You see now the weight of your watch, he said calmly. The sanctum keeps what the world forgets. I reached for him, but his eyes turned hollow, and his mouth opened wide, releasing the announcer's hymn. His form fractured into 1,000 motes of light, swirling into my chest. The song filled me, not from outside, but within. Every heartbeat pulsed with the rhythm of that ancient chant. The walls themselves inhaled when I did. The sanctum convulsed around me. The mummified monks reformed from dust, their mouths open, each singing a single unending note. The floor bled with liquid gold, flowing toward the horn like a river seeking its source. My body followed their rhythm, pulled by a force deeper than will. I raised my hand, and the horn obeyed, rising from the earth, whole again. The voice and I spoke as one. Breath is faith. Faith is bondage. The phrase echoed endlessly, each repetition louder than the last. I understood then that the sanctum had never been a prison. It was a body, and I was its heart. The chant grew unbearable. The world beyond the sanctum blurred, collapsing into darkness. I felt every wall, every relic, every corpse as though it were my own flesh. The announcer no longer spoke to me. It spoke through me. It spoke through me. The watch is eternal, my mouth declared, though I no longer willed the words. I glimpsed the courtyard above, the storm returning, rain striking the cracked roof like 1,000 tiny prayers. Through the rising mist I saw Sister Mariel's light once more, distant and trembling. She did not approach this time. She only bowed her head, whispering one final benediction before vanishing, and then silence, broken only by my breath echoing through every hall at once. The storm above raged, as if the heavens sought to drown the sanctum itself. Lightning flared through the shattered roof, casting each corridor in ghost-white light. The golden mist that had risen during the possession now drifted downward, settling over stone and corpse alike, turning everything into a cathedral of ash. I stood at the altar once more, though I had no memory of returning there. The brass horn rested in my hands, silent and cool. Its mouth no longer breathed, yet its weight felt alive. I lifted it, and the reflection that stared back was no longer mine. It was serene, featureless, timeless. The voice whispered gently from within, "Keeper no more, but witness." I walked through the halls I had once patrolled, though they no longer felt built of stone. They breathed, pulsing faintly with a rhythm matching my own heart. The monks who had risen now knelt once more, their forms dissolving into dust that spiraled toward the rafters. Every echo I made was answered by another, softer and delayed, as though the sanctum itself repeated my steps to remember them. The announcer's voice no longer commanded. It whispered lullabies. Each word soothed the air, transforming the tremor of fear into a calm beyond reason. "All watches end," it murmured. But memory endures. At the heart of the sanctum lay the cloister courtyard, now transformed into a sea of gold-lit rain. The fountain gushed with luminous water, and within its surface I saw Sister Mariel once more. She stood ankle-deep, her form whole at last, the light within her steady. "You kept the vigil," she said softly, "and freed what was bound." I stepped forward, yet she only smiled, placing a hand upon the water's surface. "Go with it," she whispered. "Let it remember in your stead." Then, without pain or sound, her light scattered into the downpour, joining the reflection of dawn breaking behind the clouds. The horn's surface began to fracture, light bleeding through its seams like sunrise through shutters. The voice spoke no longer from within, but through me, gentle as breath. Every sentinel must yield. My knees gave way. I placed the horn upon the altar where I had first heard my name. Around me, the sanctum's architecture twisted upward, the walls lifting into smoke, the roof opening to the sky. I understood then that the sanctum was not crumbling. It was ascending, freed from the burden of its song. The key at my belt disintegrated, turning to ash. My final prayer was not for mercy, but remembrance. When the villagers found the sanctum at dawn, the storm had passed. Its gates hung open, the hall silent but unbroken. Only the watchman's torch remained, burning beside the altar where no body lay. Upon the wall, carved deep into the stone, was a name. Mine, new and unweathered, as if written by unseen hands. The wind whispered softly through the corridors, carrying a faint hum like distant prayer. Some say the sanctum still breathes at night, its lights flickering when no one stands watch. Others claim they hear a voice calling through the pipes, gentle, familiar, asking the same question it once asked me. "Why did you come back?"